My name is Walter Briggs, and I am 67 years old. I was a high school principal for 28 years in Cincinnati, Ohio. I have seen liars. I have seen manipulators. I have looked into the eyes of teenagers who could spin a story so convincing it would make you question your own memory. I thought that experience had made me sharp. I thought it had made me wise. I was wrong. I was so catastrophically, shamefully wrong, that even now, sitting here in the quiet of a house I never expected to call home, I can barely hold the memory without feeling the full weight of it pressing down on my chest. But before I tell you what I found out, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever been absolutely certain about something certain down to your bones, and then discovered you had been staring at the wrong thing the entire time, please like this video and subscribe. Because this story is for you. It started on a Tuesday morning in late October. My wife Carol had driven down to our son Daniel's house in Columbus 4 days earlier. The official reason was that Daniel and his wife Amy had just lost a pregnancy, a miscarriage at 11 weeks. Carol, the kind of woman who could not hear someone was hurting without driving straight to them, had packed a bag the same night I told her the news and left by 7 the next morning. I had not gone. I had reasons. I was dealing with a leaking roof on our rental property, and if I am being honest with myself, the real reason was Amy, Daniel's wife of 6 years, a woman I had never fully trusted. I want to be fair to myself here, and I also want to be honest, because this story demands honesty. My issues with Amy were not one thing. They were a collection of small, quiet things I had filed away over 6 years. The way she interrupted Daniel in conversations. The way she always seemed to know how much everything cost. The way she had, within 2 years of marrying my son, convinced him to move their money into a joint investment account that she managed. Daniel had an inheritance from his grandfather, not enormous, but solid. $140,000 that his grandfather had worked 40 years to save. Amy was the one who handled that money, not Daniel. I had said something about it once, to Carol. She had given me the look that meant I was being unreasonable without her having to say a word. So, I dropped it. But I did not forget it. And now Daniel called me on a Tuesday morning, and his voice was wrong. It was too careful, too smooth, like a man reading from a card. "Dad, everything is fine. Mom is here, she's great. We're all doing fine." "That's good, son," I said. "Put her on. She's resting right now." "It's 10 in the morning, Daniel." A pause. Just a half second, but I caught it. She was up late. She and Amy were talking. "She's fine, Dad, seriously. I'll have her call you when she wakes up." Carol did not call me that afternoon. She did not call that evening. I called her cell phone 4 times. It rang and went to voicemail. I told myself she had left it in another room. I told myself Daniel had already said she was fine. I did not sleep that night. By 6 the next morning I was in the truck, driving south on 71, and I could not have told you exactly what I was afraid of, just that something was wrong. A principal develops that instinct over 3 decades. Something is off. You do not always know what, but you know. It is a 2-hour drive from Cincinnati to Columbus on a clear morning. I made it in 90 minutes. Daniel and Amy's neighborhood was a quiet street of 2-story colonial houses with deep front yards and old oak trees that had probably been there since before any of them were built. I pulled onto their street at 8:15 in the morning. The neighborhood was still. A dog barked somewhere far away. Leaves drifted across the pavement. I had just stepped out of the truck when the front door of the house next door flew open. A man came off the porch at a jog. He was maybe 70, stocky and solid, with short white hair and the deliberate movement of someone who had spent years knowing how to cover ground quickly. He was waving one hand at me. "Hold on," he called. "Hold on, sir. Please don't go in there." I stopped on the sidewalk. "Excuse me?" He slowed when he reached me, breathing hard. His eyes locked on mine. "You're the father," he said. "The older man. I've seen the photos." I stared at him. "Who are you?" "Frank. Frank Murdoch. I live right there." He pointed at his house, then looked back at Daniel's. "I called 911 about 40 minutes ago. They came, they went inside. I don't know all of what's happening, but I know your wife is in there, and I know it was bad." The world went very still. "My wife?" I said. "They've got paramedics in there now." He put a hand on my arm, firm and steady. The police are still inside. Let them handle it before you go in. Give them 2 minutes. I do not remember making the decision to push past him. I only know that I was moving toward the front door, and then I was inside the house, and the smell hit me first. Not blood, not immediately, just the smell of something broken, something spilled, something wrong. The living room was chaos. A tall bookshelf had toppled sideways, spilling books across the hardwood floor. A glass coffee table had a jagged crack, running from one corner to the center. A chair was overturned near the fireplace. And then I saw her. Carol was sitting against the base of the staircase, her back against the bottom step. A paramedic was crouched in front of her, speaking quietly, and she was conscious. Her eyes were open, but there was blood on the side of her face, dark and drying in her silver hair, and her left arm was held awkwardly against her chest, the angle of it wrong in a way that made my stomach drop. "Carol," I said. My voice came out strange, too thin. "Carol, I'm here." Her eyes found mine, and something crossed her face that I have turned over in my mind 1,000 times since. At the time I read it as relief. She was happy to see me. She was safe now. Now I know what I actually saw was something more complicated. Something that would take me weeks to understand. The paramedic turned. "Sir, are you family?" "Her husband. She has a possible fractured wrist and a laceration on her head. We need to transport her. She was conscious when we arrived." "What happened?" I demanded. "Who did this?" A police officer stepped forward, a young woman with a calm, measured face. "Sir, we're still gathering information. Are you the homeowner's father?" "I'm Daniel Briggs's father." "Where is he?" "Mr. Briggs is with one of our officers in the kitchen." She paused. "And your daughter-in-law is outside in a patrol car." "Amy is in a patrol car," I repeated. "Yes, sir." And just like that, before I had a single piece of real information, before I had heard a word from Carol, before I had spoken to Daniel, something in me simply clicked into place. Amy. Of course it was Amy. It had always been Amy. I had known something was wrong with that woman for 6 years. I think I should stop here and sit with that moment for just a second, because that snap judgment, that reflexive, immediate certainty, is the thing I am most ashamed of in this entire story. And I want you to understand it before I go further, because maybe you have felt something like it too. That feeling of finally being proven right about something you had believed for years. The relief of it. How dangerous that relief really is. Daniel came out of the kitchen, and the moment I saw him, I crossed the room and put my arms around him. He was shaking. He looked pale and hollowed out, the way a man looks when he has just been through something that is not finished processing yet. "Dad," he said, muffled against my shoulder. "Thank God you're here." "What happened, son?" He pulled back. His eyes were red. He had a scratch on his collarbone, just visible above his collar, a thin red line several inches long. I registered it without really registering it. "Amy lost it," he said. "She was already upset about the miscarriage, and then she went through my laptop and found some things I hadn't told her about, and she snapped. Mom tried to get between them. Amy shoved her. Mom hit the stair rail and went down." "What things on your laptop?" He looked away. "Financial stuff. I've been dealing with some investment losses. I was going to tell her. I just needed to find the right time." "How bad are the losses?" He rubbed his jaw. "Dad, let's not get into this right now. Mom needs us." He was right. I let it go. I rode in the ambulance with Carol, and for the next several hours I focused entirely on the hospital. The wrist was fractured. Clean break. The laceration needed 8 stitches. She had a mild concussion. They were keeping her overnight for observation. I sat in the waiting room and I thought about Amy. In the patrol car. Good. That woman had terrorized my son for 6 years, and now she had put her hands on my wife. I would make sure she paid for every bit of it. I did not see Frank Murdoch again until 2 days later. I had gone back to the house to pick up Carol's medication, which she had left in the guest room. The house was still technically a crime scene, but the police had cleared the main areas. As I was coming back down the front walk, Frank was crossing the lawn from next door with the same direct, unhurried stride he had used when he stopped me on the street. "Mr. Briggs," he said. "Mr. Murdoch." I nodded. "I want to thank you for calling 911. You may have saved my wife. He stopped about 8 feet from me. He had his hands in his pockets, and he was looking at me the way the experienced teachers in my school used to look at me when I was making an administrative decision they did not agree with. Patient, watchful, waiting. How is she? He asked. Fractured wrist. Concussion. She'll recover. I shifted the medication bag in my hand. I assume you gave your statement to the police about what you heard. I did, he said. I need to talk to you about that. Something in his voice made me go still. Okay. I was in the Navy for 22 years, he said. Came out as a senior chief petty officer. I have spent half my life learning to listen for things that don't fit, things that are out of place. He paused. I live alone. My wife passed 3 years ago. I'm home most of the time. My windows face the side of your son's house. Oh, right. Mr. Briggs, I have lived next to your son and his wife for 4 years. He looked at me steadily. In 4 years, I have heard yelling from that house maybe 30 times. 40, maybe more. It happens a lot on weeknights, sometimes weekends, and every single time the loud voice is your son. The air went out of the morning. That's not possible, I said. I know what I heard, he said, his voice quiet but absolutely certain. Your son is the one who yells in that house. And your daughter-in-law, she's the one I hear trying to talk him down. It's okay, Daniel. Calm down, Daniel. That's what I hear. And the yelling, it's always about money. I felt a cold thread start somewhere at the base of my spine. You misheard, I said. You heard it backward. Frank just looked at me. He was not angry. He was not defensive. He looked like a man who had decided to do an unpleasant but necessary thing and was going to see it through. The morning this happened, he said, I was in my backyard. I was close enough to the fence that I could hear clearly. I heard your son's voice first. He was yelling about a lawyer, about papers. Then I heard your wife's voice, very upset, very sharp. And then I heard your daughter-in-law. She was crying. She said, Daniel, please don't do this. And then I heard a crash. He paused. The voice that yelled after that crash. Mr. Briggs. The voice that screamed for help. That was your daughter-in-law. Not your wife. Not your son. I gripped the medication bag until my knuckles were white. She manipulated my son for 6 years, I said. My voice was shaking. She controlled his finances, his decisions. Sir, Frank's voice was not unkind. I am just telling you what I know. I am just telling you what I heard. 4 years of it. He took a step back. I think you're protecting the wrong person. He walked back to his house and left me standing on the sidewalk, with his words dissolving slowly into the cool October air. I drove home instead of back to the hospital. I needed to think. I parked on a side street near a park I used to take Daniel to when he was small, and I sat there for an hour with the engine off. Frank Murdoch's voice was a slow drip of acid in my mind. Daniel is the one who yells in that house. I thought about the scratch on Daniel's collarbone. I had registered it and filed it under my certainty about Amy, and moved on. But now my mind would not leave it alone. I thought about the way Daniel had steered me away from the financial question, investment losses. I was going to tell her. I just needed to find the right time. I thought about the inheritance money, $140,000. 2 years ago, I had asked Daniel casually how it was performing in the investment account. He had given me a number that seemed fine, and I had not pressed. Now I pressed it in my mind, and it gave way. I had not actually seen a statement. I had taken his word for it. There had been a period about 18 months ago when Daniel had called me twice asking about the rental property, whether I was thinking of selling, whether I had considered a reverse mortgage. I had thought it was odd at the time, and I had chalked it up to general curiosity. Now those calls rose to the surface of my memory, and I could not make them sink back down. The next morning I drove to see a lawyer. Her name was Helen Park. A former prosecutor, according to the firm's website, who now specialized in civil and family law. I had specifically not gone to my regular attorney because I did not want familiar. I wanted someone with sharp eyes and no assumptions. I sat across from her in a clean, modern office, and I explained that I needed to understand the financial situation of a family member whose spouse had just been arrested. I told her Carol had given Amy power of attorney to manage a joint account, and that I wanted to know the state of several assets. I was careful about how I framed it. I implied that Amy was the one I was concerned about, not Daniel. Helen Park listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at me for a long moment. "I'll need some documentation," she said. "Give me 48 hours." She called me in 36. "Mr. Briggs," she said, her voice flat in the way that experienced professionals go flat when they are about to tell you something you will not want to hear. "I need you to come in." I sat across from her again the next morning, and she slid a manila folder across the desk. "The joint account your son and daughter-in-law share currently holds 4,000 and change," she said. 14 months ago, it held $112,000. I stared at her. "That's the inheritance." "What remains of it?" "Yes." She opened the folder. I cross-referenced the transaction history with public records. The withdrawals began 2.5 years ago. Small at first. 1,500, 2,000. Then they got larger. 10,000 in a single week. Last March. "Amy was managing that account," I said. Helen Park looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mr. Briggs, every withdrawal was authorized by a device registered in your son's name. His laptop, his phone. Amy's devices never touched that account." The folder in front of me was suddenly very hard to look at. "There are also 3 credit accounts," she continued, "opened in your son's name over the past 2 years. Combined balance of $61,000. And 2 of them, Mr. Briggs, were opened using your wife's personal information as a secondary reference." Carol did not sign anything. She did not agree to be listed. I could not speak. My mouth was dry and my ears were ringing in the way they do when something shifts so suddenly that your body has not caught up yet. "There's more," she said. She pulled out a second page. "Online gambling platform statements. Sports betting, poker, slots. Dozens of transactions going back 3 years, all authorized from Daniel's devices. The losses totaled $94,000. I put my head in my hands. I am a 67-year-old man who spent 3 decades running a school. I have told students and parents and teachers that the truth is always better than a comfortable lie. I have said it so many times it stopped feeling like words and just became the sound my convictions made. And in my own family, for 6 years, I had looked at my daughter-in-law and I had been so certain she was wrong that I had never once questioned whether the person standing next to her might be something I did not want to see." Helen Park waited until I lifted my head. "Mr. Briggs," she said carefully, "do you want me to keep going?" "Yes," I said. "All of it." She reached into the folder a 3rd time. "I pulled your daughter-in-law's personal financial records through her attorney, who was very willing to cooperate. Her personal checking account has received 3 wire transfers in the past 18 months. $12,000 total." She paused. "They came from her parents' savings account in Oregon. She was borrowing from her own family to cover your son's overdrafts without telling him. She did not want the joint account to go negative. She was protecting him. I thought about 6 years of believing she was after his money. 6 years of watching her at dinner tables and holiday gatherings and telling myself I knew what she was. 6 years of the look on Carol's face when I made my quiet, certain comments. "One more thing," Helen said. She slid a single printed page across the desk. Her attorney provided this. "It's a text exchange between your son and daughter-in-law from 3 weeks ago." I read it. "Daniel, Mom is already on her way." I told her about the miscarriage. Amy, "Daniel, there was no miscarriage. Why did you tell her that?" "Daniel, I need time to figure this out. I can't have them asking questions right now." Amy, "This is wrong. I'm not going to lie to your mother." Daniel, "You don't have to lie. Just don't say anything. She thinks she's coming to help us recover. Let her." Amy, "I want to call your father." Daniel, "Don't. Please. I'm asking you. Just give me 2 more weeks and I'll figure this out, I promise." Amy, "You've been promising for 2 years." Daniel, "Amy, please." The page sat in my hands and I could not feel my fingers. He had lied to bring Carol there. My son had manufactured a miscarriage to buy himself time, and he had used his mother as a human shield against the truth closing in on him. I left Helen's office and I drove directly to the hospital. Carol was sitting up in bed. Her wrist was in a splint, her head bandaged, and she looked smaller than I had ever seen her look in 41 years of marriage. But her eyes were alert and clear, and when I walked in, they immediately went to my face. "You know," she said. "I know some of it," I said. I sat in the chair beside her bed, and I took her good hand in both of mine. "Tell me the rest." Carol pressed her lips together. She looked at the window for a moment, then back at me. "I found the credit card statements," she said. "They were in his desk drawer. I was looking for a pen. The balances, Walter, I've balanced our household books for 41 years. I know what those numbers mean." She took a slow breath. "I confronted him that morning, before Amy was even awake. I showed him the statements. I told him I knew about the gambling. I had gone through his laptop the night before, Walter. He left it open. I saw the accounts. Carol." "He cried," she said, and her voice broke just slightly. "He cried, and he begged me not to call you. He said he had it under control. He said he was going to pay it back. He sounded just like he did at 14 when he wrecked the car in the school parking lot." She closed her eyes for a moment. "And I wanted to believe him. I wanted so much to believe him. But you didn't." "Amy came downstairs," Carol said. "She heard us talking, and she came down, and when she saw the statements in my hand, Walter, she looked so exhausted. She looked like someone who had been holding up a collapsing wall for years with her bare hands, and had finally run out of strength. Her voice was steady but very thin. She sat down at the kitchen table, and she told me everything. All of it. What she had borrowed from her parents. The accounts. The years of trying to get him into counseling. The year he went twice and quit. She cried while she told me. She was not performing. She was just a woman at the end of her rope, telling the truth to someone who finally needed to hear it. I held her hand tighter. "Daniel came back into the kitchen," Carol said. "He had been on the phone in the other room. He came in and he saw us together, and he understood immediately what Amy had told me. And she stopped." She took a breath. "He was not the boy I raised. He was someone else entirely. He told Amy she had no right. He told me I did not understand. He grabbed the statements out of my hand, and I told him I had already photographed them on my phone. He grabbed for my phone, and I pulled back, and I lost my balance, and I fell." Her eyes found mine. "It was not a push, Walter. It was the struggle for the phone. But I fell." "And Amy?" Carol looked at me directly. "Amy got between us. She put herself physically between me and Daniel. She told him to stop. He shoved her against the wall. She screamed for help, and that is when Frank next door called the police." She paused. "The scratch on Daniel's neck, Walter, that was Amy. She was fighting him off. I sat there for a long time not speaking. I let them take her," I said finally. "I let them put her in a patrol car, and I stood there, and I was glad." Carol did not say anything. "I was so sure it was her," I said. 6 years, Carol. I had a file in my head. Every small thing she ever did that rubbed me wrong, the way she handled money, the way she spoke to him sometimes. I had decided what she was, and I never let anything change it." "I know," Carol said. "You tried to tell me." "Many times," she said, "and there was no bitterness in it. Just the simple truth. Amy was released from the county jail that same afternoon. Her attorney had filed for emergency release based on Carol's statement and the newly provided financial documentation. I was in the hospital parking lot when her parents' car pulled in. They had driven through the night from Portland, and I watched from a distance as Amy walked through the automatic doors, and her mother caught her and held her for a long time. I could not go to her yet, not because I did not owe her an apology, but because I needed to figure out how to say what needed to be said to a woman I had wronged, at a level I was still trying to measure. I went to Daniel first. He was staying in a hotel. When I knocked on the door, he opened it with a look on his face that told me he had already calculated how this conversation was going to go. He had a story ready. I could see it behind his eyes, polished and prepared, the same way students looked when they had memorized their defense. "Dad," he said, "listen, before you say anything. I spoke with Helen Park," I said. "I have the account history. I have the credit statements. I have the text messages, Daniel. The ones where you told Amy not to call me because you'd arranged for your mother to come down thinking you had lost a pregnancy." The prepared story collapsed. It happened visibly, the way a script falls apart when the other person goes off the page. "It wasn't I was going to. There is no version of this," I said, "where you were going to fix it. You have been running from this for 3 years, and when the walls finally came in, you let the police take your wife. I kept my voice level. I had kept my voice level for 28 years in rooms with people who were angry and frightened and cornered, and I kept it level now. You let me believe it was Amy. You said nothing. He sat down on the edge of the hotel bed. He put his face in his hands. I know, he said, muffled. Do you? A long silence. I'm sick, Dad. His voice broke around the words. I know that's not an excuse. I know it's an explanation, not a reason, but I have been so ashamed for so long. I kept thinking one more win, one more good run. I would pay it all back, and nobody would ever know, and Amy and I would be fine, and you would never have to look at me the way you're looking at me right now. I stood in the doorway of that hotel room, and I looked at my son, 40 years old, sitting on the edge of a bed in a hotel with nothing left but the truth. And I felt grief, real grief, the kind that is not clean or simple. I grieved for him. I grieved for what he had done. I grieved for Amy, for Carol, for all of it. But I did not rescue him from it. You need help, I said. Real help, not a promise to do better. A program. Counseling. You have a long road, Daniel, and I will be on it with you. But first you have to take every piece of accountability that is coming to you. Every piece. He nodded into his hands. The charges sorted themselves out over the following months. Daniel's attorney negotiated with the district attorney. There were financial fraud charges, though Carol declined to pursue criminal charges for the physical altercation. She called it an accident and stood by that. And I respected it even when I was not sure I agreed. Daniel entered an inpatient treatment program in January. He pled guilty to 2 counts of financial fraud, received a suspended sentence with mandatory counseling and restitution requirements. The restitution included repaying Amy's parents the $12,000. That was not something the court ordered. That was something I arranged. And Amy and I had a conversation 2 weeks after that night in the parking lot. She had moved into an extended stay hotel while things got sorted. I drove over on a Thursday evening and I sat across from her at a small table near the window. And I told her that I did not know how to properly account for 6 years of being wrong about a person. She looked at me for a long time without speaking. You never hid it, she said finally. You were always pretty clear about what you thought of me. Yes, I said. I used to try to figure out what to do differently, how to make you see me differently. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Eventually I stopped trying and just focused on Daniel. I was looking for confirmation of what I already believed, I said. The way you managed money, the accounts I took, every neutral thing, and I made it evidence for something I had already decided. That was not fair. It was not right. And I am sorry. She looked at the table. She looked at the window. She looked at me. I spent 6 years loving your son, she said, and trying to keep him from drowning without letting anyone see that he was drowning. Because he begged me not to. Because he was ashamed. Because he said his father would never forgive him if he knew. She paused. Your opinion of him mattered to him more than anything, Mr. Briggs. More than getting better. That's not your fault. But it's what it was. That sat between us for a long moment. What happens next? I asked. For you. She took a breath. My attorney is filing for divorce. The financial records make the grounds straightforward. She said it without anger, just the flat steadiness of someone who has already done most of their grieving. I'm going back to Portland once it's settled. My parents are there. I have a job prospect. I understand, I said. Walter, it was the first time she had ever called me by my first name. I don't want you to feel like I'm disappearing as punishment. I'm not. I just need to start over somewhere that doesn't remind me of all of this every day. That's reasonable, I said. And I meant it. I drove home that night, and Carol was in the kitchen, and I sat at the table and told her everything, all of it, the conversation, the words. She listened, and when I was done, she poured me a glass of water and put it in front of me and sat down across from me. She deserves peace, Carol said. She does. So does Daniel, if he does the work. He does. Carol reached across and took my hand, and so do we, Walter. We sold the Columbus house. Daniel's attorney handled the liquidation of the remaining assets to cover part of the restitution. There was not much left. We let the bank take the rest. We did not fight it. Carol and I talked about whether to stay in Cincinnati. The house there felt strange too, in the way that a familiar thing feels strange after you have looked at it differently. We decided to stay, but to change some things. We converted the rental property into an income stream that actually made sense for retirement. We simplified. We stopped accumulating. Daniel finished the inpatient program in March. He is in outpatient counseling now. He calls twice a week. Our conversations are careful, deliberate things. The conversations of two people who are still finding the new shape of their relationship. There are moments that feel like the old warmth. There are moments that are still brittle. Both are honest, and honest is what we are working with now. Amy made it back to Portland. She sent Carol a card at Christmas with a brief note that said she was doing well and that she hoped we were too. Carol has the card on the refrigerator. I look at it sometimes when I am getting the orange juice in the morning. A woman who owed us nothing chose to extend kindness anyway. I am still working on deserving that. The thing that changed the most, if I am being honest, is quieter than any of the events I have described. It lives in the small moments. The way I listen now when someone is telling me something I do not expect to hear. The pause I take before I file information under a belief I already hold. The question I ask myself that I did not ask before. Is this evidence or is this confirmation? I thought being a principal for 28 years made me good at seeing people clearly. It made me good at spotting certain kinds of deception in certain controlled environments. It did not make me immune to the deepest and most comfortable kind of blindness, which is the kind where you have known someone your whole life, and you love them and you will unconsciously bend reality a little to protect what you believe about them. That is not a weakness exclusive to me. It is, I think, one of the most human things there is. But knowing it is human does not make it harmless. It does not give it a pass. Amy spent 6 years paying for my blindness. Carol fell on a staircase and fractured her wrist because the person I trusted most easily was the person I should have questioned, and the person I questioned most was the only one in that house trying to hold things together. There is one thing I want to say to anyone listening who sees themselves in this story. Not in the dramatic parts, not in the extraordinary betrayals and the courtroom moments. I mean in the quiet, ordinary part that came before all of it. The part where you have made up your mind about a person and you protect that conclusion the way you would protect something precious. I understand why we do it. Sometimes those conclusions are right. But sometimes they are the most expensive thing we own, and we do not know the price until it comes due all at once. Carol is in the garden right now. She does her physical therapy exercises every morning, and then she goes out to the garden because she says it is the same kind of work. Small motions, patience, tending to things that take time. Her wrist has healed. She moves carefully, but she moves. She is the strongest person I have ever known, and I told her so last week, and she told me that was a very low bar, considering how long it took me to notice. We laughed about it. That is something. This past spring, on Carol's suggestion, we started attending a support group at a church 15 minutes from our house. Families of people struggling with addiction. We go on the second Thursday of every month. We sit in the back and we listen, mostly. Sometimes we share a little. There is a man there named Robert, around my age, who started coming 4 months ago when his daughter's addiction finally came to the surface after years of hiding. He reminds me of myself. The way he sits. The careful posture. The man who has always been in control of the room. Last month he said something in the group that I have been carrying with me since. He said, "The worst part isn't that I didn't know. The worst part is that I didn't want to know." There is a difference, and I had spent years confusing them. The room was very quiet after that. I looked at Carol and she looked at me, and I thought about a Tuesday morning in October, and a man named Frank Murdoch crossing a lawn in a deliberate, unhurried stride, telling me something I did not want to hear in the language of a man who had spent 22 years listening for things that did not fit. I think about what would have happened if I had kept walking, if I had dismissed him the way I had first wanted to, if I had held onto the version of events that was comfortable and right and already organized neatly in the file in my head. I think about Amy in that extended stay hotel, alone, waiting for something to resolve. I think about what she deserved and how far short of it I came. And then I think about what Carol said to me the night everything finally settled. She said, "We can do this correctly. or we can do it over. And Walter, we are too old to do it over. She was right. She is almost always right. I am working on accepting that earlier in the conversation rather than later. If you are out there watching this and you have a person in your life that you have filed away under a conclusion that feels certain, I am asking you not from a place of superiority. I am asking you from the floor, from the lowest point I have ever stood, to take one more look. Ask one more question. Leave the file open just a little longer. The truth does not always arrive when you are ready. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a retired Navy senior chief crossing a neighbor's lawn on a cold October morning, asking you to stop for just 2 minutes before you make the biggest mistake of your life. I am Walter Briggs. I was wrong. And that is the most important thing I have ever admitted out loud. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from today. And if this story made you think of someone you may have misjudged, I would love to hear your thoughts below. If you are new here, please subscribe to Stormborn Vengeance. We share stories like this every week. Stories about the hard, quiet work of becoming who you should have been all along.